Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome, everyone, to a brand new deep dive.
Hello.
Today, we're plunging into the world of a game that became, well, far more than just entertainment for millions, especially right when the world needed an escape. Animal Crossing. New Horizons.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We've pulled together quite a stack of sources here, articles, some research notes, our own observations, and they offer some really interesting insights into why this specific game resonated so deeply.
Right.
Why it became such a huge cultural phenomenon. It's not just about the features. It feels like it's really about the human connection it somehow fostered.
Exactly. So our mission, as always, is to go through this material, pull out those essential nuggets of knowledge, and really try to understand its massive appeal, its mechanics, and its surprising impact, especially, like you said, given its launch timing. It played this remarkable cultural role for so many people. Let's start with the fundamentals. What is this game at its core, according to our sources?
Okay, so the sources consistently describe it primarily as a life simulation game. It masterfully blends sandbox creativity with really casual, open-ended gameplay.
Okay.
Think of it maybe as like digital escapism built on a foundation of crafting, collecting, and community building.
And it comes from a pretty famous developer, right? Nintendo.
That's right, Nintendo EPD specifically. It launched March 2020 exclusively for the Nintendo Switch.
The timing of that launch.
Yeah.
Wow. It feels almost fated, doesn't it? Dropping right as global lockdowns were really taking hold.
Undeniably. The sources consistently point that out, how that timing just massively amplified its impact. The core premise is you sign up for this deserted island getaway package from Tom Nook. He's a tanuki, sort of a raccoon dog character.
Right, the main guy.
Yeah. And you arrive on a randomly generated island with, well, basically nothing. You build a life completely from scratch.
It's that real blank canvas appeal. And what about the mechanics underpinning this? What makes it tick?
Well, key to its design, the sources point out, is its deliberately open-ended nature. There's a real-time clock that mirrors your own reality.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, day-night cycles. Seasons change in sync with the real world. And it has this distinctively charming, almost comforting art style. It's really built around letting you set your own pace and define your own goals. There's no, pressure.
And
Yeah.
that design choice clearly paid off big time. The sources mention some pretty staggering numbers.
Oh, monumental is the word.
Yeah.
By 2024, the sources are citing over 45 million copies sold worldwide.
Wow.
Which makes it one of the absolute best-selling Switch titles ever.
That's incredible. And critically, how was it received? Did reviewers like it as much as players?
Generally, yes. It garnered a lot of praise, hit a 90 out of 100 on Metacritic, which is quite high.
Pretty good, yeah.
Critics widely applauded its relaxing pace, that sort of gentle rhythm, and the sheer depth of customization it offered players. You could really make your island your own.
Were there any initial stumbles, though, according to the sources?
A few, yeah. Some early reviews did note a perceived lack of content depth, sort of in the very early game, before Nintendo started rolling out those post-launch updates. But overall, the reception was overwhelmingly positive right from the start.
And it picked up some awards, too.
Absolutely. It won the Grand Award at the Japan Game Awards in 2020, and it was a nominee for Game of the Year at the Game Awards that same year. High honors.
Beyond the commercial success, the critical acclaim, that cultural footprint just felt immense, didn't it?
Yeah.
Especially during that time.
It really did. The sources really emphasize how it became a genuine virtual haven during the peak of the COVID-19 lockdowns.
Yeah.
People were using it for virtual events. Actual weddings, graduations, birthday parties. It just became this vital shared digital space when physical space was suddenly so limited.
And that must speak to its broad appeal, right?
Yeah.
Reaching way beyond just typical hardcore gamers.
Definitely. It clearly welcomed casual players, people who are maybe more interested in the creative expression side of things, and of course the longtime fans of the Animal Crossing series. Its accessibility offered something truly unique and really needed during that specific period.
And one of the most fascinating things our sources dug into is how this game builds a sense of narrative, a story, without having a traditional plot.
Right.
They talk about these distinct phases or sort of journeys the player goes through.
Yeah.
Like the very start, this initial arrival phase.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Yeah, the sources frame this beginning as the island getaway arc. You're literally dropped onto your unique, randomly generated island with just two random animal villagers and Tom Nook's nephews, Timmy and Tommy. It's just a state of pure potential. Empty, but full of promise.
And Tom Nook's role is pretty key here at the start.
He's your initial guide, yeah. He provides the absolute essentials like a tent to sleep in, the Nook phone, which is your in-game smartphone, and that very first loan. You pay it back in bells, the game's currency. The sources know he sets you up, gives you the tools, but then immediately gives you freedom. He doesn't micromanage.
So that early gameplay is really about figuring things out, exploring, gathering basic stuff.
Exactly. The core loop is gathering resources, wood from trees, iron nuggets from rocks, catching the local fish and bugs. And you also meet your initial neighbors, those 2 animal villagers, who each have their own distinct personality traits, which adds a layer of kind of quirky interaction right from the start.
And the sources highlight the subtle ways the world feels alive even then, even when it's mostly empty.
They do. Things like real-time weather changes happening, the wildlife shifting based on the actual season or the time of day. It all grounds you in this living, breathing world. And the Nook phone, which you get early on, has apps like the Critterpedia that tracks all the creatures you discover. The sources point out how this app subtly blends education. It gives you little real-world facts about the fish and bugs you catch with the gameplay loop.
What would you say is the core feeling, or maybe the key insight, of that initial phase based on what we've read?
It's fundamentally about freedom and self-discovery, I think. There are minimal restrictions. The insight seems to be how the game immediately empowers you to start defining the identity of your unique island right from day one. You make the first marks.
Okay. And then as your island grows, maybe you pay off that first big loan from Nook, the sources describe a pretty significant shift in focus. They characterize this next phase as building a community.
Yeah, that's a key transition point. Repaying that initial loan lets you upgrade from your flimsy tent to an actual house, which, by the way, is expandable with further loans from Nook.
Of course, more loans.
Always more loans. But the narrative weight kind of shifts from just establishing yourself to actively growing the island's population and its infrastructure, building things.
How does the game encourage that community building aspect?
Well, you start attracting and hosting more unique animal villagers eventually. You can have up to 10 living on your island. You do this by building furniture for them, setting aside plots of land. And the sources mention that interacting with these villagers through dialogue adds these small, ongoing stories. Like maybe you learn about Flick the Chameleon's artistic aspirations, or you do little side quests for them, like delivering gifts. It deepens your connection to them.
Then there's a pretty pivotal moment the sources mention, right?
Yeah.
Unlocking a central building.
Yes, absolutely. Achieving enough progression, getting your island developed to a certain point, leads to unlocking the resident services building. This is where Tom Nook is joined by Isabel.
Isabel, the fan favorite.
The cheerful Shih Tzu assistant, exactly. They manage island affairs together. Isabel gives daily announcements, keeps you updated, and she introduces the island rating system. This rating goes up as you collect resources, decorate, make the island nicer.
And reaching a certain rating has this symbolic payoff, I gather.
It's crucial, yeah. Achieving a 3-star island rating is a major milestone. It triggers a visit and an actual concert from KK Slider,
The famous musician dog.
the guitar-playing dog celebrity himself. The sources really see this moment as symbolizing your island's transformation. It's gone from a deserted patch of land to a truly desirable, thriving community. It feels like you've arrived.
And the player's own actions are constantly shaping this sort of emergent narrative.
Completely. Crafting tools and items using DIY recipes, which, the sources note, was a brand new feature for the series in New Horizons and decorating the island. These aren't just gameplay loops, they are how players visually write their island's story. And that real-time clock adds another layer, you know? Shops have opening hours. Unique events like fishing tournaments happen on specific dates. It keeps things dynamic.
So this phase is really defined by what? Creativity and connection. Building things and relationships.
That seems to be the core insight, yeah. It's about building relationships with these quirky villagers and crafting your own plot or story through visual design and interaction rather than following some rigid developer-scripted storyline.
Okay. And finally, after that big KK Slider concert, the sources reveal the game opens up even further, enabling what they characterize as the terraforming and mastery phase. What's that about?
This is the final major unlock, really. It's the point where you gain almost unprecedented control over the island itself. Terraforming allows you to completely reshape the landscape.
Like physically change it.
Yeah, literally. Raising cliffs where there were none, digging out rivers or filling them in, laying down custom paths. You become the island's architect.
Wow, that sounds powerful.
It is. You get the Island Designer app on your Nook phone, which gives you the tools to sculpt waterfalls, create multi-level areas, or even build entire themed zones. People have made like Zen gardens or replicas of cities.
That's amazing.
The sources highlight this as both a major technical achievement for the game and a core driver of its incredible longevity. It gives you endless possibilities.
And this level of creative control, that must have led to a huge community phenomenon online.
Right.
People showing off their islands.
Absolutely. Players started sharing their incredibly elaborate terraforming designs on social media, places like X, Reddit, Instagram. It fostered this massive global community built around creativity, sharing inspiration, and just showing off what was possible with these tools.
The sources also mention things that keep the game feeling fresh even after you unlock terraforming. It doesn't just end there.
No, definitely not. Seasonal events tied to real-world holidays add these ongoing episodic chapters throughout the year. You know, Bunny Day around Easter, Halloween events, Turkey Day with Franklin the turkey chef for Thanksgiving.
Right.
They deepen the sense of a living world with ongoing traditions and special limited-time content to collect.
And those visiting characters, they add another layer too. The special NPCs.
Exactly. Characters like Gulliver, the shipwrecked seagull who washes ashore, or Celeste who teaches you about stars. They add moments of humor, mystery, and unique rewards with their dialogue and tasks. Though the sources did note that some players found the tasks associated with these visitors could sometimes feel a little repetitive over the long haul. Find 5 communicator parts again.
Yeah, I can see that. So with no traditional story climax, no big boss fight, how did the sources describe the game's ending, if you can even call it that?
They explain there's a deliberate absence of a traditional conclusion. The game's resolution is entirely personal. It reflects your unique journey and the final state of your island. There's no winning in the traditional sense.
So the goal is just achieving your own vision.
Exactly. Whatever that vision might be. Finishing your house, collecting all the fish, designing the perfect island layout. It's up to you when you feel done, if ever.
And the underlying themes, they just continue throughout this whole process.
Mindfulness, creativity, connection. Yeah, they're woven into every part of the game, even the late game. Villagers will comment on your progress, reinforcing that sense of a living, reacting world.
Okay.
And the museum, curated by Blathers the owl, who loves fossils but hates bugs. The sources note how his detailed descriptions of fossils, fish, bugs, and art actually blend education with storytelling, adding this layer of lore and context to all the things you find and donate.
Let's shift gears slightly then and talk about how this game was actually made, the development side and some of the deeper mechanics.
Sure. So developed by Nintendo EPD, as we said, Animal Crossing. New Horizons was directed by Aya Kyogoku. And it builds on this long series legacy, right? The first game came out way back in 2001 in Japan.
What was Kyogoku's specific goal with this entry, New Horizons?
Yeah.
What does she want to achieve?
The sources indicate her key vision was really to significantly expand player freedom. She drew inspiration from popular sandbox games, things like Minecraft maybe, and directly incorporated feedback from the previous big title, New Leaf, particularly regarding customization options. Players wanted more control.
Were there significant technical hurdles in bringing that vision, that level of freedom, to life on the Switch?
Oh, definitely. Scaling that entirely open-ended island design and especially implementing the detailed terraforming capabilities we talked about, that was a major challenge.
I bet.
The sources note it required developing entirely new tools internally and optimizing really heavily for the Switch hardware to make it run smoothly.
The real-time clock mechanic feels so central to the game's identity. Where did that even come from originally?
That core concept actually goes back to the series' creator, Katsuya Eguchi. Apparently, he was inspired by his own childhood growing up in rural Japan. Yeah, where he felt deeply connected to the changing seasons, the rhythms of a small community, nature. The timing of New Horizons' release, of course, just powerfully reinforced this mechanic's resonance during the pandemic lockdowns.
Right, giving people that connection to the outside world, even virtually. And Nintendo didn't just release it and walk away, they kept adding to it.
They did, yeah. Responding partly, perhaps, to those initial critiques about content depth, Nintendo released significant free updates over time. The biggest was probably the version 2.0 update.
What did that add?
Major new features like cooking using ingredients you could grow, farming, and bringing back Brewster's Cafe, The Roost. It significantly increased the game's depth long after launch.
Digging into the mechanics a bit more then, beyond just collecting and building, what are some specific systems the sources highlight as being really important?
Well, resource gathering is fundamental, yes, but The system of using DIY recipes to craft tools, furniture, everything, that's key. And again, a first for the series, having it be so central.
Yeah.
The Nook Mile system is also highlighted quite a bit. It rewards you for completing all sorts of tasks. Big and small, catching your first fish, talking to neighbors, pulling weeds.
Like achievements, sort of.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And it gives you this secondary currency, Nook Miles, which you can use for unique upgrades, special items, or even tickets to travel to random mystery islands for rare resources, or maybe finding new potential villagers.
In terraforming, as we mentioned, that's the big late-game mechanic.
It's the ultimate mechanical expression of creativity in the game. The sources praise it as a real technical achievement on the Switch, giving players that unprecedented control over the physical space.
Yeah.
Also, the vibrant, almost hand-drawn art style isn't just cosmetic. The sources note how essential it is to creating that immersive, charming world that it just feels nice to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And the soundtrack by Kazumi Totaka, a legendary Nintendo composer. It subtly shifts every hour, creating different moods throughout the day and night. It's incredibly effective.
Any fun bits of trivia or like surprising community details the sources mention? Anything that stands out?
There were plenty. For Easter eggs, the sources point out KK Slider's hidden song, simply called KK Song. It's actually a deliberate nod to Kazumi Totaka's own signature musical melody. He apparently hides a little tune in many of the Nintendo games he works on.
Huh. That's a deep cut for Nintendo fans.
Yeah.
What about some of the discussions or maybe even controversies that popped up in the community?
Well, the sources definitely mention the fan speculation around Tom Nook's loans. Some players interpreted them as the subtle critique of capitalism, being forever indebted.
Right, the memes about him being a villain.
Exactly. But the director, Aya Kyogoku, has explicitly pushed back on this in interviews. She insists that Tom Nook is fundamentally benevolent, that he genuinely cares about the player's well-being and progress, and the loans are just a gameplay mechanic with no interest.
It's fascinating how a simple game mechanic can spark such different interpretations, isn't it? The online community sharing must have been absolutely massive for this game.
Oh, huge. Players were constantly sharing island designs, custom clothing patterns, tips, everything, especially on platforms like X and Reddit. There's even, get this, a whole speedrunning community.
Speedrunning for Animal Crossing.
Yeah. Dedicated to achieving a 5-star island rating as quickly as possible, the sources mentioned records are apparently under 20 hours.
Under 20 hours to get a 5-star island. That's a completely different way to play a game meant to be slow and relaxing.
Totally different mindset, yeah. But people find ways to compete in anything.
Were there any other minor pain points or controversies noted beyond the Tom Nook theory?
A couple were mentioned. Initially, there was definitely criticism about not being able to have multiple islands or save files on a single Switch console. That was a limitation later addressed by Nintendo.
Ah.
And there were also some debates within the community around things like villager trading markets, people trading popular villagers online for real money, or tons of in-game currency, and whether certain practices felt like a perceived pay-to-win dynamic, even though the game itself doesn't have those kinds of microtransactions built in.
Right, the player-driven economy stuff. And its influence clearly stretched way beyond just the game itself into broader pop culture.
Definitely. We saw major fashion brands like Gucci hosting virtual events and fashion shows on islands they'd designed.
Seriously.
Gucci. Yeah. And fans were painstakingly recreating real-world landmarks, famous art museums, entire movie scenes within the game's creative limits. Even with Nintendo's strict rules against external mods, people found ways to share custom designs widely using the in-game Nuflink app on their real phones.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, why is this deep dive into Animal Crossing? New horizons relevant to your understanding of games or culture?
Because, as the sources really clearly show, it was genuinely more than just another successful game release. It became a significant cultural phenomenon. It sort of redefined digital escapism for millions, and maybe more importantly, served as this kind of lifeline when traditional social interaction was suddenly cut off for so many.
Yeah, the insight seems to be that its enduring appeal lies in offering this deeply personal, very low-pressure journey.
Yeah.
It happens within a world that is both incredibly charming and almost immediately accessible.
It really served as a virtual sanctuary during a uniquely challenging global moment. And it fostered these global communities built around shared creativity, inside jokes, virtual events. Its influence permeated really unexpected corners of pop culture.
And it seems to tap into this fundamental human desire for both, like peaceful solitude and genuine connection, somehow balancing both.
Exactly. It caters to different player needs simultaneously. Pure relaxation, outlets for creative expression, simple social interaction. Its accessibility, simple controls, no real fail states, makes it welcoming to almost anyone. But the depth of customization and collection keeps dedicated players engaged for hundreds, sometimes even thousands, of hours.
It really feels like the core invitation the sources highlight is to simply exist within its world.
Yeah, to slow down. To appreciate the small moments, catching a rare bug you've been hunting, seeing a seasonal event for the first time, getting a funny, weirdly written letter from one of your animal villagers, and ultimately to build and inhabit a world that is uniquely, completely yours. No judgment, just your space.
So looking at everything the sources covered, Animal Crossing, New Horizons really stands out as this unique blend of creativity, community, and maybe mindful living.
I think that's fair. It carved out this very distinct, very gentle space in the gaming landscape, and its lasting legacy, its continued influence since that 2020 launch, it's undeniable, precisely because of how it connected with people on such a personal level during a global crisis.
It's fascinating. This deep dive really shows how a game, without a strict plot, without required objectives beyond, paying off your loans to a tanuki, how to create such an incredibly rich personal narrative for each individual player.
Yeah.
So maybe the thought to leave you with is, what does that tell us about the kinds of stories we're drawn to? And perhaps even the stories we build for ourselves, both in these virtual worlds and, in our own actual lives.